What if I told you that Sogo could predict how well an item will sell long before it hits the store shelves? What if I told you that Sogo could create a loyalty ecosystem that would make it fun for customers to share their buying preferences? Finally, what if I told you that Sogo could derive value from the 70% of in-store visitors that don't make a purchase? By utilizing predictive analytics and a revamped loyalty ecosystem, you will be able to do all of these things and much more. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Morgan Book, and along with my colleagues Simona Stankov, Phil Wang, and Drew Tippett, we are really excited to be here with you today to share a breakthrough way Sogo can utilize and leverage digital technologies to enhance customer engagement and drive growth. But first, I'd like to take a look and dive into the current state that Sogo is operating in as we see it. You've done a remarkable job establishing yourselves as leaders within the Hong Kong retail industry, commanding 22% market share within department stores. But competition, both internationally and here in Hong Kong from various retailers, make the need for innovation ever more important. Your key core strengths, however, such as your prime shopping location, as well as your reputation amongst shoppers, put you in a favorable position to do this innovation. Some challenges, however, that you identified in the case and in the company visit, such as your limited store space and inadequate tech infrastructure, can make this innovation difficult. So in consideration of these factors, we pose this question: how should Sogo utilize Sogo Rewards and develop its eShop platform to better engage with customers and maintain their leadership within the Hong Kong retail space? So to answer this question, we recommend that you implement Sogo Select, which is a customized browsing platform that integrates customer preferences with Sogo's items both in-store and offline. At its core, Sogo Select starts with the Sogo Rewards app, where customers will be able to browse the wide variety of Sogo items in a way that's fun and interactive. They'll be able to like or dislike these items, and this data that's derived will be powerful for all of Sogo's stakeholders, starting with the consumer. Sogo consumers who are utilizing this app will be able to browse the exciting items that you currently sell in the store that they are not able to do with any of your competitors. Additionally, they'll be able to receive personalized promotions that are catered specifically to them. But Sogo Select also benefits your vendors, who will be able to utilize powerful data to predict how well an item will sell, as well as how to arrange their in-store layouts. Ultimately, this benefits you, Sogo, as a brand, because you'll be able to use this data to better plan and initiate current and future shopping initiatives. So this implementation starts with building out Sogo Select and takes it all the way up to analyzing this data and utilizing it to drive growth. But to dive into how exactly this looks to the customer and how it appeals to them, I'd like to pass it off to my colleague, Simona.
Thank you, Morgan. Since Sogo Select will be based off the current rewards program you offer, it's first important for us to understand how this reward program works for the consumers. And right now, you've seen relative success with your rewards platform with about 500,000 individuals registered. However, you haven't necessarily seen the level of engagement that you would want from these most loyal, most valued customers. And many of them are only coming into the stores a few times a year. There are two key areas where you can increase your customer engagement. The first being in the number of consumers that you encourage to sign up on this platform, and the second being really incentivizing them to use the rewards program and to shop more online and in stores. And that's where Sogo Select comes in. Through a very transparent system where consumers can indicate their preferences, they'll be able to engage with specific content and browse through what they like and then get the promotions that Morgan was mentioning before. At the end of the day, this will drive both in-store engagement and engagement on your budding eShop platform. We'd love to give you a few examples of what this would actually look like from the consumer's perspective. On the following screen, you see 3 typical interfaces that the consumer will see. And the first 2 are the ones that you already have. So in registering, the consumers will be able to indicate their category preferences that will then drive some of the content that they're seeing on the app. They'll still have access to the type of content and promotions that you're developing today, but the new feature really comes into that menu at the select option. And once consumers go to this feature, they'll be able to see a wide range of products across categories that they can then like and dislike to create a customized profile for themselves. So you can see in these examples that Sogo Select really covers a lot of categories such as apparel, accessories, beauty, and tableware. And that's something that's important for you to keep in mind as it can relate to the rest of your portfolio.
I have a question. So about the how do you build that platform of products? As our business is mainly consignment, we don't own an inventory of our brands. So how can we get the brands to agree with us to share their product information? And as you know, the number of brands in our store is quite huge. So how feasible is it to do this, and in terms of the time frame?
We'll dig into the specifics of an implementation plan for you a little bit later on, but right now we're seeing really a 3-year time horizon for implementing Sogo Select and reaping some of the benefits. And we understand that you are dealing with a lot of brands and different vendors in your stores today, and we believe that Sogo Select, through a very robust data gathering system, will also benefit your vendors and really allow them to understand the preferences of consumers that are coming into their stores and even consumers that maybe aren't, that they would like to attract. And Phil is going to dig into this a little bit later, but really the value that we're seeing is that in collecting all of this information from the different brands and items that vendors would help you build out on the system, consumers would then be able to reap very specific rewards that would drive them to come to those brands and to come to the store. So as an example here, you can see that different consumers can set alerts on products that they can then find out more about as they're going into the store. If something's really hot on the shelf at a specific vendor, they'll know where it is and when to access it. Additionally, they would get very catered and personalized promotions for the types of items and categories that they're interested in buying. And these rewards will be collected as consumers spend more time on the platform, so it would really be incentivizing them to continue liking and disliking the different items available. And so ultimately, this will drive in-store engagement, but it would also help you build out your current eShop platform. And we really commend you for taking steps to develop yourselves in this e-commerce space, because we're seeing that users that have multiple channels for shopping are actually 23% more likely to visit stores in a 6-month period. However, we also recognize that e-commerce is still an area that's relatively new in the adoption phases in Hong Kong, and that there are a lot of big players like Alibaba, for example, that are currently working in this space. And this is where we see Sogo Select really bringing you an advantage in trying to establish your presence with e-commerce. It will enable you to understand consumer preferences even when they're not shopping in stores, to then cater very specific items and promotions to them, both on the eShop platform and for anything in stores.
But can you explain a little bit how the rewards work, right? I seem to get the impression that by simply browsing and liking and disliking and going here and there, right, I'll get rewards, right? So I'll just have my Filipino maid do that, and I'll run up huge rewards for every item I can think of.
So we definitely considered ways that users may try to find loopholes in the system to get as many rewards as possible. And so what we've determined when thinking about user behavior is that they will be incentivized to be the people on these platforms putting their genuine interests and preferences in the system, because those preferences will give them the promotions that they actually want. So it's not very beneficial for a consumer to give their phone to their friend and say, just like and dislike a bunch of different things, because at the end of the day, the promotions that they might get from that won't be appealing to them as a consumer. And this is definitely something that requires a little bit of experimentation, maybe in a pilot phase, to determine how much consumers are engaging with the platform and the appropriate level of engagement to rewards.
I can ask my maid to like a Hermes handbag 100 times a day. Does it mean that I get more rewards?
So you won't get the handbag 100 times a day to be able to like it. So once you like something, as a user, it'll be built into your kind of profile of things that you've liked or disliked. And that, at the end of the day, will drive some of the other items that you're seeing. And it does require a little bit of tinkering to see how much consumers are actually using these platforms. But we believe, based on some browsing information that consumers are currently doing, that this will be something that they really enjoy, especially because it then relates to that personalized shopping experience for them versus just getting a lot of general promotions.
So what's the business model implications for us to actually achieve this kind of Sogo Select kind of model because, I mean, as Ms. Lau just mentioned, department store runs on a consignment basis, right? So we don't actually own our stock, own our inventory, and then it's very volatile in terms of the product selections. So, I mean, what's the kind of business model implications in order to do this?
So this would definitely change the way that Sogo engages with vendors, but we believe that vendors would be very open to this idea, and I'll actually hand it off to my colleague Phil to tell us a little bit more about how this would benefit your different stakeholders.
So to begin our discussion on how Sogo Select will create value for you, and we'll begin by talking about how it aligns with consumers. So Sogo consumers will want to participate in Sogo Select because it directly connects to their loyalty program preferences. So first, 71% of consumers continue to use loyalty programs because of relevant rewards. In fact, 43% of affluent customers have come to actually expect these specific types of rewards. So Sogo Select will directly meet their needs because it'll provide not just relevant promotions, but truly personalized promotions based on the preferences. Second, we know that Hong Kong consumers spend an average of 4.5 hours online every day, primarily on their mobile devices. And so we believe that the browse and like features of Sogo Select will create an engaging experience for consumers similar to the ones that they already enjoy right now when they browse. At the same time, reward them for their behavior. And lastly, 33% of consumers stop participating in loyalty programs because of a lack of a seamless omni-channel experience. And Sogo Select will address this pain point by creating a more cohesive and complementary ecosystem with the application, the eShop, and physical department stores. Sogo Select also appeals to vendors, as Simona said before. By sharing data that will enable brands to improve their performance, Sogo will incentivize their participation in the program. In our discussions with Sogo employees at the company visit, we saw a clear desire by brands to share data, and that desire makes a lot of sense. In this graph, we can see the impact of consumer analytics on financial performance across 4 key dimensions: profit, sales, sales growth, and ROI, with the purple relating to companies that don't extensively use consumer analytics, and the blue relating to companies that do extensively use consumer analytics. And we see that the ones that leverage consumer analytics vastly outperform those that don't. And at the same time, we know that brands have continually expressed strong desire to have more space in Sogo department stores, but that's not a possibility for Sogo given the constraints. We believe that with this data, vendors can better predict trends and more accurately predict trends to optimize things like inventory and product mix to ultimately improve their performance. So overall, Sogo Select will provide comprehensive and holistic data on consumers to drive valuable insights to improve performance for not only Sogo, but also its vendors. As a whole, Sogo Select will engage consumers with an omni-channel ecosystem and thus drive sales and loyalty. So with Sogo Select, Sogo Rewards, and the eShop platform and physical stores will all complement each other to engage consumers in a broad way. And this engagement will drive sales, as 85% of consumers are more likely to shop in a store with personalized coupons, and 64% of consumers are more likely to shop in a store that offers suggestions for items. And 86% of consumers use at least 2 channels when shopping. Additionally, omnichannel consumers spend 4% more money in store and 10% more money online than single channel consumers. Most importantly, consumers who purchase online and in store have a 30% higher lifetime customer value. And we've seen something like this work in the past. In 2010, Sephora launched a similar application and saw significant revenue increases that Drew will touch on in the financial outcomes. Overall, Sogo Select will create a cohesive and seamless omnichannel experience that will not only drive value for Sogo, but also its key stakeholders, like its consumers and its vendors. Now, I'd like to hand it off to Drew to talk a bit more about how this strategy can be easily and effectively implemented.
You do. Following up of Eric's question and Ms. Lau saying, Sogo has a lot of vendors, and this Sogo Select, what implications that might have on the companies in terms of the technological upgrade and or staff to analyze those data? Have you thought about that?
That's a perfect question and leads actually right into the technology infrastructure. So now that we've sort of gone over exactly why it's good for stakeholders, Sogo Select is good for stakeholders, and what exactly it looks like, we want to delve into how exactly your company would go ahead and implement such an idea. And so we wanted to start with the technology infrastructure. As you mentioned, it's a little bit outdated right now. In your current system, you have the POS system as well as the CRM software. What we suggest is the addition in the future of an analytical platform as well as Sogo Select itself. And to answer your specific question of what upgrades would you need, we would suggest implementing something called an enterprise resource planning system. This ERP system would be implemented to essentially help connect all 4 of these different platforms. You'd be able to then seamlessly integrate data throughout each of these platforms and move it into the analytical platform that we suggest in order to truly leverage the power of data. And to go into more detail of exactly what that looks like, with this edition of Sogo Select, you can now leverage predictive analytics. To start with the overall metrics that you now be able to gather, you can see here that one of the metrics is different items that members dislike and like. Essentially then with that, you'd be able to, with this now massive data, what are the actual applications of it? We come at it from a general point of view of being able to have different suggested in-store and eShop items. From a more product side of things, you'd be able to tell which styles are now in fashion, as well as even on the vendor side of things, an additional incentive for them is they'd be able to help predict different types of demand coming forward based off what items are liked and disliked. From a placement point of view, you'd be able to rearrange in-store layouts, again, based off customer preferences. And perhaps one of the most important is promotions. You'd be able to now send personalized promotions to the consumers that are using Sogo Select, based again off of the different likes and dislikes that they have. And then pricing is the final piece of the analytical portion, being the fact that based off high demand or low demand, dynamic pricing could be put in place. What I really want to point out though, is that this seamlessly integrates into the future state of technology. With technologies that retailers are adopting, such as beacon technology, RFID chips, and facial recognition. What I mean by this, and I think it'll help by giving an example. Imagine you're a consumer and you walk into the store. You spend a long time looking at an item. Now with beacon technology, we would be able to, and Sogo would be able to tell exactly what item they were looking at and for how long. Now imagine this consumer then going home. That based off this new data and logging onto the Sogo Select app, you'd be able to refer them to the different items that they were looking at in store for a significant amount of time. This just demonstrates that both in your current state as well as your future state, you'd be able to leverage analytics properly in order to reach your consumer.
I buy all this. The problem is that just getting a customer to download another app is very difficult these days. Just count how many apps you have, right? So I've been deleting. So, so how do you, it feels like that you just, the benefits, I see the benefits, right? But why would I get on your app and download it and give you all my data and blah, 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 right? So I get rewards everywhere too. So I just don't feel very compelling.
Based on the research that we've seen about how consumers like to shop and those personalized experiences that they're really looking for and expecting within stores, we believe that once consumers start to interact with the Sogo Select platform, they'll have enough incentive to continue. So then the question really becomes, how do you incentivize them to download that app, to pay attention to it among everything else they have on their phone? And for that, we would recommend a 3-pronged marketing strategy to even just raise consumer awareness of how this platform works and what exactly it is. So we would recommend attacking it from the point of sale, influencers and social media perspectives. At the point of sale, consumers would be able to learn about the Sogo Select app and how that can integrate into their in-store experience as well as e-shop opportunities. And that's something that can be targeted at anyone making a transaction within Sogo as long as the vendors are on board, as we discussed before. Additionally, we see that a lot of consumers in this target market are very affected by influencers as well as social media. So large quantities of them will actually change their shopping habits or look for specific items based on what influencers are doing, for example. And with that information in mind, we would recommend doing something as simple as maybe filming a video with a popular influencer in Hong Kong who's using the Sogo Select app as a way to then incentivize that target market to get onto the app themselves and experience the benefits. And a similar approach can be done with social media as well. So now that we've kind of covered what that implementation would look like on the marketing side, I'll hand it kind of back to Drew to talk about other.
So just one thing before we continue. So we talked about what kind of data you want to collect about, like, say, shopper movement, track on an individual consumer basis. What are the potential concerns that you might have before we actually have to go forward for this plan?
So to answer your question, as far as the overall, from an overall standpoint, what we have to consider is, from a privacy standpoint, certainly that's part of it. And we sort of consider essentially that data regulatory laws prevent it from potentially making it difficult to collect this type of data from a privacy standpoint. And so we found that we would actually look to employ different types of legal authorities and professionals in order to sort of see what the regulatory laws essentially would be and try and work around them to make sure that we're complying with them as far as that goes. And Simone, I think, is a little bit of an addition to the overall data point of view.
Yeah, so when looking at some of the regulations related to data privacy, we saw that Hong Kong had that 1996 personal data privacy ordinance that really regulates how data is both collected and then used. And there are very specific rules and regulations regarding not collecting extensive data. That's not required for how companies will use it in the future. But we believe that just because consumers are already comfortable providing likes and dislikes on different platforms that exist, Facebook is a good example, that they won't have too much problem doing the same thing on the Sogo Select platform. Additionally, we see an opportunity for you to be unique in the way that you communicate how Sogo is collecting and using this data for the consumer. And of course, you can lay out all the benefits that this would bring consumers from that personalized shopping experience, but then even something along the lines of allowing them to pick which specific data points they want to share versus maybe hold to themselves would be something very unique that your competitors aren't doing. So right now, a lot of companies are making consumers just check terms and agreements boxes that are really bundles of everything the company needs to collect, and that leads to low transparency and trust within the consumers. And so to really build on the trust that you already have with all of the people coming into your store, we would maybe recommend exploring an option that's very transparent and allows consumers to pick and choose which data they would like to share. And again, we believe that they will be willing to share their likes and dislikes just because they get so many benefits, and we see them doing the same things on other platforms.
So do you have another alternative plan in terms of the budget? Since I can see that to implement this, the budget needed is quite big. And as a company, we also have other projects going on. So how do we balance that? And how can we achieve what you want to achieve, but maybe in a different scale?
Yeah, so to answer that question, we certainly consider the fact that this is a significant budget and potentially a significant budget in comparison to what you're spending on currently. That's where an alternative to sort of reduce these types of costs would be to launch something like a pilot program, as Simona mentioned, as therefore you'd be able to launch this on a much smaller scale with very specific brands that you see are successful with your customers, and therefore be able to reduce these costs significantly. And then therefore, if the pilot program does prove to be successful, then you'll be able to launch Sogo Select in full, and then these costs would make sense in terms of eventually, now that you've seen the success of the app, then you'd be able to build out these different types of costs. And to delve into specifically from an overall standpoint, with now these technology initiatives, as you know, as we've been talking about, you're spending significant amount of capital. Part of that capital is being spent within the human resources as well. And so that's where we suggest to help support these technology initiatives and upgrade your workforce, recruiting at universities like HKICC, for instance, and recruiting young talent to eventually help employ their skills in order to leverage them when using their skills to analyze the different data that we've mentioned. And Ms. Lau, I know you mentioned earlier a question as far as the timeline goes. So this is where we'll delve into detail as far as the 3-year time horizon. And so we saw this in 3 components. The first component is the technology component, and that's where we would build out things like the ERP system and the Sogo Select app. The second component being the marketing initiative. We discussed a little bit of details of in-store displays and things of that nature. This is where the marketing would run concurrently alongside the technological initiatives. And finally, the human capital component as well. This is where during those 3 years you would be hiring the different types of employees, training them, and then making sure that they know going forward how to use the different types of technologies that would be utilized within Sogo Select. And then from a long-term perspective, as we mentioned a little bit, as far as this initiative could be well implemented within the HKICC stores, integrated with the different future technologies such as beacon and facial recognition. And so now that we've sort of discussed how exactly Sogo Select would fit into your overall plan and how it would be implemented, we wanted to discuss the overall outcomes that you would see and benefits. And to start again with the cost breakdown. So these different costs here are broken out by startup and ongoing. The startup side of things and both the ongoing, the majority would be made up of the technological costs as well as the overall, from an overall standpoint, the marketing costs as well. And so that's where we have the initial startup costs. These are done based off, we source these from different types of sources, different web development options, and as far as the marketing goes, we actually use Alibaba as a comparable. The reason why we use Alibaba is they have 5% of their marketing budget, or excuse me, 5% of their total revenue being spent on marketing. We saw this as a fair comparable because that would include essentially the cost that you would incur with the different discounts and promotions that you'd be running in order to get these types of consumers on your application.
Since you're talking about a cost, have you thought about the 2021-22 completion of the Sogo? How would that affect your thinking in terms of the cost you are trying to build to have the Sogo Select? Did you look at that?
The 2021, what exactly is?
2021, the new Sogo that will be completed.
Oh.
How does that take into consideration of your plan?
Yeah, and so that's where, as far as our plan goes, this is where we saw Sogo Select is essentially perfectly implementing itself within the launch of these HKICC stores and within the Twin Towers themselves. And that's where we saw this as a potential even promotion point. Because Sogo Select, if you were to have your loyalty members using this type of application, you could use Sogo Select as a promotion point for you to drive those loyalty consumers to these HKICC stores for further promotions, for instance. As far as the overall from a technology standpoint, the HKICC stores are the perfect opportunity to implement the different types of technologies, such as the beacon and facial recognition, within the HKICC stores as well, since it's basically, at this point, a blank canvas, and you'd be able to leverage those types of benefits from those technologies as well. And so just
Do you mind going back to page 2 and tell us how your idea addresses the whatever limitations or the problems that that Sogo faces?
Be happy to answer that for you. So in consideration of the first limitation, Sogo is constrained by limited floor space. With Sogo Select, vendors will be able to better understand which items customers actually want to purchase before they even purchase them, so they could prioritize which items they have on display and perhaps pull back items that aren't being frequently liked by users of Sogo Select. Addressing the inadequate tech infrastructure, Sogo Select doesn't require a lot of hardware in the store, so expensive technologies like beacon or facial recognition. It's an app that needs to be built out, and most Hong Kong consumers already have they have 3G LTE that they can use the app for, so they wouldn't have to use any sort of hardware. And finally, e-commerce is still relatively unadopted. That's currently true, but trends indicate that while this percentage of consumers using e-commerce is going up, we actually see that most consumers are using e-commerce in conjunction with retail stores. So we see that e-commerce and this omni-channel platform is driving shoppers into stores. So with Sogo Select, consumers will be able to browse what exactly the items they'll be able to find at Sogo and perhaps like those items, and then when they come to the store, they'll know exactly where to find them.
Are you suggesting that you are trying to limit the time they spend in the stores? Or reduce the time?
No, certainly not. But perhaps make their time more efficient in the stores. So certainly, consumers can get frustrated if they can't find a certain item in the store, and then perhaps if they can't even find it, they leave the store. But with Sogo Select, we're just making their time in the store more efficient. But we want them to be in the store, certainly. So now I'd like to pass it back off to Drew, who's going to kind of wrap up the financials.
Perfect. And so to just briefly touch on the overall from a financial point of view, as we mentioned, from an overall cost standpoint, you would break even by achieving a 15% increase in the amount of transactions. And we believe this is completely achievable, as we saw a similar case study from Sephora, as Phil mentioned before, as Sephora in 2010 launched a very similar application in which they had different types of likes and dislikes of their beauty products. And what we saw is in 2010, they had about $1 billion in Hong Kong revenue. In 2017, they now have $31 billion in Hong Kong dollars. In revenue. And that's where we saw that as a perfect case example of the application of technology really driving revenue forward, and believe that 15% is achievable. And to essentially finish up, Sogo Select appeals to both your consumers, your vendors, and finally you. And Sogo Select will help perfectly set you up to launch you into the digital age. Thank you.